Welcome to our workshop on deploying MCP servers in production, building agents you can trust. I'm Maya, founding engineer here at 14AI.
I'm Wojciech, CEO and co-founder at Golf.
I'm Michael, co-founder at 14.ai.
And we're really excited to have everybody here for our discussion. So before we get started with our Q&A and discussion about MCP security, let's all share what our favorite game is in the chat. So I'll get started. My favorite game is Uno because I just think it can make for really fun discussions and jokes.
Okay, I wanted to go with The Last of Us, but I'm not sure if that's the game you wanted to hear, but yeah.
It depends. Right now, I'd say like Monopoly.
Awesome. Monopoly. Yeah, Monopoly is really fun. Yeah. And welcome everybody in the audience. As always, if you have absolutely any questions or any comments, always feel free to write them here in the chat and we're going to get to everything. Welcome, Marie. You said my favorite game is Monopoly 2. Welcome, Ugo, Werewolf, SF. Oh yeah, and everybody also can write in the chat where you're calling from. So we're live in SF right now.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we can get started now with a little bit about Golf. Wojciech, if you want to introduce yourself and Golf and what you guys do.
Yeah, one more time, I'm co-founder and CEO at Golf, and Golf provides a security layer over your MCP servers, mostly for enterprises. So we provide an MCP gateway, which A, give you the whole auditability trails of your MCPs. B, we can prevent you, help you detect the prompt injection attack on your servers.
Thank you.
Great. Should we dig into
Yeah.
Q&A? So we've been obviously working quite a lot with MCP recently. The big question is, where do we get started? There's all companies around announcing, hey, we have an MCP server, start using it. And the first thing you realize is that, well, actually it's a local MCP for your editor, right? So it's calling like file system APIs, and it's not meant for remote, which is we're building, a remote product. And then some of them have a remote MCP, and you start working with it, and it just doesn't work. Yeah. And this has been household names here. The biggest companies are rushing to be on the MCP map.
Yeah.
But what we see in practice is that, the picture is kind of different. And so I would like to start off maybe with a broad question of how has adoption been recently, let's say in the last 6 months?
Yeah.
And is that like accelerating, or are we like sort of big still?
I think that's a great question because, as you mentioned, you got two types of MCP servers. One, local ones, and those are loved by developers itself because you just get the admin credentials over your server. You can just do stuff. You can just input the API key in your text file and that's it. But that's a nightmare in the enterprises. The second one are those remote servers which are popping up, and I think that the remote is the long-term vision, and that's where we are going. Like the same way the same way you're using APIs today. I feel like every API company, which has APIs, will have their own hosted MCP server. And we already started seeing that. And you have a couple of great servers, which are mostly used by developers like Sentry, GitHub, etc. And that's because MCP itself is starting from the most common use case, which is technical people connecting those servers to their IDEs, and that's what the closest to the birth of the protocol. We need to make sure we need to actually notice that the protocol itself is super fresh as well. It's popped up in November last year, and we are already seeing huge enterprises building those servers to just propose that to their end customers. So in terms of the real adoption, I feel like there are a couple of parts which people need to understand about how to build a great server first, how to make it usable, and people need to. I think that people are starting to understand that converting one-to-one open API spec to an MCP server is not gonna work. It doesn't work. You don't have to. You don't need 90 tools from your one server because context window is blowing up, and the context of the lamps is everything you have today. So I feel like the best MCP server I've seen has very narrow scope of tools, like 10, 15 tools, which are sometimes like behind those tools, you have workflows. So for example, when I have 3 different endpoints, which are for sending like a Stripe payment, I can just stack up that the 3 endpoints, create a workflow behind the tool, and make sure that it's understandable for agents. So that's what we are saying. Another thing is a legacy APIs. Like you see a lot of those having problems with a lot of input, like glitchy parameters. And again, people, LLMs cannot understand correctly how to fill out the 20 different parameters from those tools. So we need to think, while building the server, what are the use cases? And I think that's the most important part about the whole building process. It's not just wrapping up your API, but like actually building something what's with use cases in mind.
Yeah. And what do you feel like? So I think like right now the feeling when MCP came out and like 9-10 months in is that for many companies it's kind of like a thin wrapper on top of an open API spec. And so it feels like kind of shallow. Okay, I mean in most cases you don't need anything more than your MCP spec, and it's actually an open API with descriptions. What do you feel like are some of the main barriers to wider adoption? And where I want to go here is we're hearing about things like Coinbase new like X42 protocol for autonomous like payments by API.
Yeah.
Do you feel like these are the sorts of things that need to happen in the ecosystem to go beyond just like the shallow open API wrapper?
I don't think so, to be honest, because right now what we are seeing with MCP adoption is those B2C use cases, like playful use cases. You connect the MCP server to Claude and you're trying to do some stuff as a like end customers. But that's not where the main use case of the API itself is. Like the best use cases are from, for example, platform teams in big companies doing integrations for internal tooling. And I think that's where the MCP, like B2B use case of MCP are gonna actually flourish and are gonna be very useful for that in the future. For example, right now the platform team needs to do integration for hundreds of endpoints with standard APIs. Right now, when they're building like any internal tool with LLM, what they can just do, they can just connect to the remote MCP servers, which are provided by a first party. And I think like to accelerate the adoption, we need more first-party servers, more providers exposing their APIs through MCP. And that's the first thing, because it cannot be that way that if you want to use someone's servers, like if you want to use a server of the service, there's only local one. And if you want to do a remote one, you just need to do it yourself. And I think that the barrier is also from the security side, because some of those companies, they don't want to, like MCP itself and like remote ones have bunch of problems with security. The first one is the authorization and authentication. Like right now, we have all that in place within the spec. Like the OAuth is fine, but like API keys are still not solved yet. So there is no proper way to actually implement that. So whenever the end service got the OAuth in place, it's super. I would say it's straightforward to do it, but also you need to make sure that you actually do your own DCR proxy, because like dynamic layer registration is not supported by most IDP basic IDPs. So you just need to wire it yourself at the company. So I think it's still more about the friction of the auth, B, the audit trails. Okay, when I deploying my first party MCP server, how can I make sure like who's accessing that when, and like who, what, and when? And people are forgetting about that right now. Like we are seeing a lot of those servers as just a thin wrappers without any production ready use cases. But like to make it real, we need to take care of the whole security part, and that's why like bigger companies are afraid of shipping that remote servers and taking responsibility over that. Another thing is also like the prompt injections, which are super, which are gonna be popping up like every month. Probably will be new attack surface. And what you can do, you can literally, there are two use cases, two possible defense vectors on that. The first one, whenever you are consumer of the API of the MCP server and you're using GPT, you need to have the middleware, because you don't own the ChatGPT, you don't own the server because it's a first-party server. So what you as enterprise actually can own, you can only own the data flow. You can only own the actual audit trail to know what's happening, and that's the problem of today, because I cannot just let people connect bunch of data of our internal data or customers' data to just go and use it with GPT. I need to know what's happening with those data and when something happens. So yeah.
Thank you.
That's great. I think we have a question from the audience.
Yeah, so this one is, for founders deploying MCP servers at scale, what's a quick win tactic to make support agents enterprise ready?
Quick win tactic. I mean, I would say the quickest is not to convert OpenAPI to MCP like directly. I would say that's the quickest one. It's just a narrow, really think about use cases. Who is gonna use it, how? And by doing that, just build servers, not just blindly converting what you have, what we were used to as humans with APIs, but just think about like an actual agent experience and how they are gonna use it. So I would say that would be the first quick win. That's cool that you can quickly build this converter like wrapper OpenAPI to MCP, but it's just a POC and it's never gonna go to production. So yeah.
Thank you. We have another question from Łukasz. Do you have any standard framework or playbook for deciding how to go from API to MCP, such as which endpoints to package into MCP tools, prompts, or resources?
Yeah, definitely don't do any write tools. It should only be read only as for now, and I think it will stay that way for a long time, especially the enterprises. So that's the one thing. I probably reduced like 30% of your tools for your APIs. But the second one is, again, who wants to use it? I think like that's the very crucial thing people forget about by just rushing to those making marketing leads with MCP, that hey, someone needs to use it and it needs to be usable actually. So how people are using that? The most successful launches of MCP I saw were when you had your beta users of your customers, you actually deployed first for V1 of the server, gather feedback, seen how people are using that, and then moved forward with adjusting the server, adjusting the tools, adjusting the capabilities. But if you're just exposing and launching a server just for launching, and you think that someone will just come and use it, I don't think that will work that way. So yeah.
We have also another question. So what do security concerns look like for B2B versus B2C based MCP servers, and how to minimize attack surfaces for each?
Yeah, again, for B2B, for local servers, it's mostly like we've been taught to not to run any code from the internet directly get from the internet on our machines, just because it's not secure. But right now with MCP servers, we are doing that right now. Because what you can do, like as a developer in a, let's say, enterprise, cool. You found this MCP server on GitHub. It seems like it's legit. It's got a couple hundreds of GitHub stars, but you haven't checked the code actually. You haven't went through the code. You just downloaded that, and with another release of the server, you're receiving malicious update of the server. And what's happening? Like you got the supply chain attack on that server. So I feel like the best practice for B2B is not to use local servers. That's the first thing. That's what I'm hearing from CISO, to pushing that, hey, we know how to solve problems with networks, so let's just stick with that. Let's just use only a remote one, and maybe just do it maybe just use the first party to minimize the risk of that. The second thing is like the prompt injection on the server itself, more like on the vendor. Like I am as a vendor, I don't want my server to expose PII data, or like to just leak PII data of our customers. So I need to make sure that I have proper guardrails and proper gateways and actual middleware to scan the data payload, the data flow, which is flowing from your server to the agent, and B, have the proper audit trail of what's happening inside of that. And those two things are the most important, I would say, with B2B use cases: audit trails, proper auth, and an actual prompt injection guardrails, which we are trying to do right now. It's not so easy just because in this scenario, it's kind of similar to SQL injections, but we operate in natural language right now. So people can get very creative, or they're gonna for sure get very creative on the possible attacks. So yeah, in B2C, it's more about again, in B2C you don't own. I think it applies to B2B as well, but it's a bit different use case. For example, in B2B or B2C, you don't own the agent, you don't own the servers, but what do you own? You actually own the data. Like, data is your resource. So you need to make sure that, okay, the proper auth is set up. Like, people cannot access data from without their proper permissions. And the second one, okay, you need to make sure that you are seeing what data was accessed, and that's what you can do only when you have a middleware between those agent and server, which you actually own. So yeah.
Interesting. I want to follow up with another question here. There's, I think, another thing that you also don't own anymore. I'm very curious to hear your take on is the vendor prompts, right? So basically now we're inviting many vendors inside of our system, and agents will be, taking decisions based on the vendors' provided prompts. And my question here is, how do you envision this scaling? So a really basic example, you're an enterprise software, you're an enterprise company, and you have a calendar MCP provided by Google and a calendar MCP provided by Microsoft. They could both be competing for using their calendar service more by essentially doing prompt, prompt manipulation to make sure that they're always the favorite choice of the agent.
Yeah.
Right? And so basically now we don't have this formal contract, the API deterministic surface anymore. We're introducing non-determinism in the way that the agents will start using your service.
Yeah.
And it's kind of a mess. I know there's multiple ways to mitigate that by giving additional prompts, but right now I have this feeling that there's this rush towards everyone will start exposing their MCP servers, and then they have an interest in making sure that the agent is actually going to call their service versus someone else. What are your thoughts here?
I feel like that's to me that sounds like hypothetical problem, because I don't see why would I use two different calendar MCP servers. I probably don't use 3 or 4 calendar servers. I don't use the same services from different providers. Typically, I'm trying, at least myself, I don't use 3 different observability platforms and use their MCP servers. So that's my first thought. The second thought will be
there shouldn't be overlap over services. What services provide? And
sure.
Maybe it's you're not using it for the same thing, but that other service might have a service that the other one is doing. You see what I mean? Overall, there might be some overlap. You don't have a clear distinction between an MCP service capabilities. Right?
That's interesting. But
so I guess the point is that we sort of the performance of our agents is now very much determined by how well external system prompts work within that system of MCPs connected to your agent.
To be honest, I don't think that I've seen that happening yet, just yet. Probably just because we are early, but also I feel in the near future, still the problem is the context itself. So whenever you are connecting multiple servers, you're just blowing up the context. So I feel for now, that server discovery or a dynamic server discovery will be based on some sort of one mother server, which is connected to my agent, and this server decides which server to pull up to my agent to accomplish this task based on the context and the intent.
Yeah.
And this probably will solve. Probably, or this problem still exists, but then on another level, because it will exist on the level of this, let's say this aggregator MCP, you can call it gateway MCP, but not directly with an agent. However, to be honest, I've never thought about it, how to solve it, because I don't think that we are there yet with the MCP development. And like, I don't think that companies are so sophisticated about their MCP servers to actually make this kind of moves. They don't know how people are using that, because most of those servers don't have any observability, auditability, like anything. They just pull up this and see if that's gonna work. Yeah. I think that there will be more like worse on this edge, what you mentioned, that hey, I want this company to use my server rather than your, and how to trick agent to use it. Yeah. But then I feel like the only way to do it will be, again, have the middleware and have the guidelines. But
I think that's key. Yeah. I mean, okay, there's the engineered part of like making like engineering your prompt.
Yeah.
I think like right now in the short term, where everyone is rushing to build MCP servers, the first like immediate impact it has is that prompt is just really bad.
Yeah.
And our performance will be degraded by plugging in this MCP server because they haven't done enough work in building right prompt. Yeah. So as you're saying, probably like a middleware layer that can improve for your specific use case. Yeah. Make adjustments, I think is going to be key.
Have the memory, have the actual loop. Like the one interesting idea which I heard was about like the agents should have their own feedback loop to the servers, because right now agents are the consumers, like users of the MCP. So they should have the way to actually give a feedback. Hey, I want to accomplish this task, but I didn't have correct tools. So that will give the end vendor the idea what they should build next, what's happening, exactly how people are using that, and what's needed. Because right now it's just a black box. Yeah, you connect that, and yeah, you are seeing some calls, some failed calls, some whatever, but what people actually need. You cannot just talk with an agent and just ask them, okay, cool. Like you can talk with people, but I think that maybe that should be baked in the protocol itself.
Do you think it's a protocol like responsibility?
I'm hearing a lot since the beginning of discoverability of the MCP, and again, I think it could evolve, and it probably will evolve into that. But we have more important things, I guess, to be solved on the security level than the product itself.
And you're confident MCP is going to be that protocol that's going to evolve?
I think from what I've seen on the enterprise adoption, I think so. Even right now, I feel like yesterday I just saw somewhere that Apple wants to give the support for iOS and macOS to MCP. So I feel like MCP is starting to be the protocol for agentic tools, for literal APIs for agents.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So Lucas has another good question here.
Do you see any adoption of MCP in clients other than IDEs and main LLM provider websites?
Yeah, we see a lot like internal MCP clients, and that's actually one of the, I would say there are three ways of building the MCP as a vendor. The first one is you're building that internally first. So you build an MCP server, you build an agent, and you're using that internally. That's the first thing. Second thing, you're just building out the MCP server to be connected to those external MCP clients, like Claude, GPT, Cursor, whatever. Like not even Cursor, but like more like a business side of the use cases. And the third one is probably someone else building an agent with your MCP server. And I feel like the most popular one right now, which we are seeing, are those first two ones. So first, I'm building internally my own MCP client and MCP server. So hey, I own both sides, so that's super convenient. And I feel like the biggest companies are doing that just because they are scared of the security concerns, and they don't want to let yet external people access the server outside of their platforms. Why? Because they can own everything in the platform, and the security is pretty straightforward to be done. The second one is a bit trickier, and the second and the third one are a bit trickier because you don't own the system, the part of the system, and you need to A, test that properly, B, actually check what are the use cases again, because like cool. You can test that by some imagined use cases which you had, but it probably is not gonna be similar to what you're gonna use it for. So yeah, definitely seeing those first party, the companies building their own clients and servers for that.
Great. And I think Ugo's question kind of we covered with the ability to scale tool calls when external prompts get inserted. So I have a practical question nowadays. So GPT-5 came out, like Grok 4 last week. These models are getting increasingly powerful and fast as well. I think speed is really essential here because you want to be able to actually have agents run as many tool calls as possible, potentially concurrently, and then assess the performance and sample and stuff like that. What is the current state of the art in terms of like upper ceiling to amount of tool? But you're saying like we should be careful of like not just like putting 50 open API calls inside of our spec. What have you seen as like the current sort of upper limit where performance starts degrading?
I think it's still like 30, 40 tools, and it's all across different servers itself to keep the performance. I feel like the current mid step is to use one of those like gateways which consolidates and which routes the traffic and the tools choices, and that's how you can overcome the actual context boundaries. And I think that's actually pretty good. I mean, you'll get more latency because then this server will defer and search for actually request other servers to be plugged in. But at the end of the day, you want to have the server like agent which actually can call correct tools rather than just call any tools.
I think I find this like very like fascinating to think about these things because there's so many like moving parts in your system. And what are the ones you actually want to put? Like one thing you're saying like 30 calls, but this could be like 10 times that if we start working with like sub agents, right? And each sub agent could be tasked. And if we have the sort of right hierarchy of prompts route to the right sub agent, then that scales. But again, like it's not just about the MCP part. It's your SOPs, your like general system prompts instructions, your knowledge articles that dictate like how your product works, and depending on that, it might like call another like MCP tool, right? So like the whole like orchestration part, like as a whole on your entire system it's a very fuzzy problem, right?
That's correct, but I got a pretty different take on the whole like orchestration of agents, because like you will never get to 100% of effectiveness of the agent, correctness of the actual agents. And when you start chaining agents, we are getting a drop of the actual performance and the accuracy of the answers, because your first agent is 95%, then you chain it with the second agent, the third agent, you multiply the effectiveness, and you're ending up with 60% actually being convinced that it's actually correct. So I'm very bullish that in the future we'll have like a one agent, like the orchestration will not be a thing, and like chaining agent will not be a thing, just because it's not deterministic, and you cannot make sure that the whole system will have the effectiveness of the like actual real production grade level. So that's my take here.
Great.
Well, thank you so much, Wojciech. This was a wonderful discussion. Of course, if anybody has any other questions, feel free to add them in the chat. And in terms of next steps, we're going to be doing a recap of this discussion, and you're going to find it on our blog. We'll be sharing that shortly. And also next week, if you're interested in learning about product feedback and how you can add that to the development of your product, we are going to be hosting another workshop with Edge Dive. So you're going to find the link to that in the chat as well. And we hope to see you next week.
Cool.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much.
Speaking with you.
Yeah.
Thank you. And thank you to everybody who joined us live.